Good morning and welcome to the programme. Today you will hear quite an account from an MP who has felt forced to leave her party, the Scottish Nationalist Party, and defect to the Conservatives. In fact, you may have seen the footage of Dr Lisa Cameron crossing the floor of the House of Commons yesterday to take her seat on the blue benches, as it were, alongside the former Prime Minister, Theresa May. Why she claims she felt she had to leave is quite the story and experience, as you'll hear shortly. I mentioned the story of a politician at the start of the programme. Let me tell you a bit more. Dr Lisa Cameron was a Scottish Nationalist Party MP until a week ago when she stunned the SNP and defected to the Conservative Party. She is refusing of entertaining the idea of giving her constituents a by-election. She has gone off the idea of an independent Scotland. And as you will hear, she feels the fact that she is a Christian and had concerns about the party's gender recognition reforms in part led to her being bullied and ostracised by the SNP. It's quite an account. She also can no longer live in her own home due to security concerns after receiving many threats after news of her defection broke a few days ago, and says the behaviour of her former SNP colleagues led to her, a former mental health professional, needing to take antidepressants. I spoke to Dr Lisa Cameron, now a Conservative MP, just before coming on air this morning, and I started by asking why she left the SNP.
Basically, we'd had a meeting when I was a member of the SNP in the group, and an MP had apologised and been suspended for sexual misconduct towards a member of staff, and we had all been advised to basically welcome this person back and support them. And because I had worked as a psychologist for a number of years, I thought it was important to raise the impact on the victim. So I had said, shouldn't we be supporting the victim in this sense and, have more of a victim-led strategy with this? And it was almost like tumbleweed blew through the room. And
So this is you sitting with your fellow SNP MPs. You are talking about Patrick Grady,
yes,
who was your SNP colleague, who had the whip restored at the end of last year after sexual harassment suspension from the party. Just giving our listeners some context there.
Yes, and throughout the situation, I'd kept in touch with the victim. I was only MP from the SNP to remain in touch with the victim. And he had felt himself very ignored, and that his mental health had been ignored as well, and that he had been ostracised and actually had to leave his job. And that's why one of the reasons I brought up, shouldn't we be having more support for the victim in this case? But it didn't go down well at all, and it just led to months and months of hostility. I was treated as though I wasn't a team player for raising those issues, and relationships with colleagues became very, very strained, and very few words exchanged. Sometimes I'd be sitting in the tea room and no one would speak to me. Some people would actually change table at times, and it was just very, very difficult to feel ostracised to that sense, because I felt I was doing the right thing. When I went to see the counsellor about it at Westminster, he reassured me that I was doing the right thing. And
Sorry, is that an independent counsellor? Or what does that word mean? Because it can mean two types of counsellor if you're listening to politics.
Oh, yeah, of course. No, it's like a therapist.
Right.
So there's a welfare service at Westminster, which is really, really good. And they provided me with therapy for I saw him again this week. So it's over a year now from June when this meeting happened last year to now, really to try to rebuild my confidence in terms of the way I was being treated and my ability to try to gain that so that I could find my voice again on these issues, because for a long time I felt very silenced on it.
I should again say you're talking about a male teenage party staffer who was subjected to unwanted sexual advances. The MP in question, as I said, Patrick Grady, readmitted to the party, to the SNP's Westminster group. He stepped away during the summer last year, and this was after a retrospective suspension was imposed and deemed to have been served, and the police didn't take any further action. But your point, and bringing this to you, was you raised the thinking about the victim, the alleged victim in this, at this meeting, and then was that the end of a lot of your relationships, are you saying, with your fellow SNP MPs at Westminster?
Yeah, it was. I had thought that this was quite a sensible thing to say because I'd worked with victims in court settings as a psychologist and in mental health services, and I knew the impact of victims who had come forward. It's a very brave thing to do, and I knew that this particular individual was really struggling. And he had hoped not that his career wouldn't end in politics as well. So I felt we should be giving him support to make sure that he could remain in the workplace. But it was, very much about support for the perpetrator rather than the victim. And at that point, that's when relationships just deteriorated to the point that there was very little communication at all.
Did you go and talk to Nicola Sturgeon about it at the time?
I've not actually had a one-to-one with Nicola Sturgeon since I was an MP elected in 2015, so that's not a channel of communication that I've ever had.
I suppose she was the leader at this time we're talking about. I mean, that in itself, some people may find interesting, but what I meant by that was, who did you tell within the SNP, I know you went to a councillor, that this wasn't going okay for you in your party? Because someone needs to be told sometimes those things to know that someone's struggling.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was actually the leader at the time, Ian Blackford, who had, stated that people should be supporting Patrick on his return. And it was following from that direction to the group that people's behaviour towards me started to change quite dramatically. So I felt very alone with it. I went to the councillor, but I did inform all of the chief whips. We've had 3 over the last year that I was attending the counselling services at Westminster and that I was really struggling in terms of my mental health. And I felt it was a kind of almost like a group direction to follow the leadership position on it. So I felt very alone with it, and that's why I needed the counselling. And certainly colleagues, they didn't reach out to me during that whole time, and the chief whip, I never had a one-to-one meeting with him or anything at the time after the telling him I needed the counselling, any of them actually. So I just felt left on my own with it.
We should also say that Grady was the former SNP chief whip, and you described there Ian Blackford, just for people who aren't necessarily across this. He was then the leader of the Westminster group of SNPs, just to paint this picture. I mean, you've used some very strong language about your decision to leave. You've talked about it was the equivalent of leaving an abusive marriage.
Yeah, I felt that I didn't have a voice at all, and that I was being bullied, that I was ostracised. There were other instances. So, for instance, I was put onto the committee in the House of Commons without anyone speaking to me about it. So I was put onto the HS2 committee last year. No one asked me if I wanted to be on the committee. No one even informed me I was on the committee. I read about it in the newspaper that I had been put onto the committee. At one point, they sent me an email asking, saying, you're moving out of your room tomorrow to a different room, and we've sent crates to you. And I had to say, well, actually, the councillor that I'm seeing says I'm not meant to have a lot of upheaval just now, so I don't think that I should be transported to another room without any discussion. Then they put Patrick Grady next door to me when he returned to the group. So a lot of things happened that actually felt very hostile and intimidating to me, alongside the fact that colleagues were blanking me and there was no support for me from the group.
Were you able to do your job?
I was able to do some of my job. The constituency work, obviously, I was able to do because I've had a good team in the constituency who were supporting me. I think over the past year I've spoken a lot less in Westminster than I had the years before, and that's because I felt a lack of confidence and I felt a lack of support. I did sort of try to throw myself into the other types of work you can do out with party politics, so to speak, like the all-party group work, so chairing the health group, the disability group and the digital assets group. So I did a lot of work on those issues because it kind of took me away from the problem that I was having and gave me, I suppose, some kind of support from other people in other settings who, out with the party. So I was really seeking that kind of support. I also have a very good office manager in Westminster who was a great support to me throughout the whole thing, and she regularly would just sit down, have coffee with me, we would have dinner in the evening, and we would schedule that because I was there myself, away from my family, and no one else in the party were doing any of those things with me.
It has been suggested that you were expected to be deselected by local party members as the candidate for the next general election for the SNP. I wanted to give you the chance to respond to some who say that's the real reason why you defected to the Conservatives.
Well, our relationships had deteriorated for those 12 months. I hadn't been spoken to. People felt because I was keeping in touch with the victim and I hadn't, been the team player in that sense. We had seen 25,000 people, and I had won MP of the Year award from the Patchwork Foundation, for my disability work. So I just felt, my goodness, it's a continuation of the bullying, really. And I went to see my GP about 2 weeks ago, and to get my antidepressants again, and he had said to me, look, you've had your counselling, that helps you to cope, the antidepressants help to take the edge off, but you need to change your situation. You're not going to feel any better unless you do that.
Did you go on to antidepressants because of this?
Yes, yes. So I went from my time in the SNP, I went from being a mental health practitioner, psychologist, helping other people to becoming a patient, really, because of this, yeah.
What's that been like?
Yeah, at first, obviously, it's been a really hard journey for me, and a journey that I felt very isolated and alone throughout. But I've had a good support from Westminster. That's another reason I don't like this sort of narrative. Everything in the Scottish Parliament is good, everything in Westminster is bad. There's good practice in both, and there's difficult practice in each as well that can be improved on. But it was very hard to kind of just cope day to day. And that's why the antidepressants helped, as the GP said, just it's taking the edge off things. But it didn't change the situation. And I think when he finally sort of said that to me, the penny dropped, and I was just like, yeah, I need to... This is untenable now. I need to move, and I need to be true to myself in that regard. So,
were you scared to defect to the Conservatives?
Yeah, because there's so much hostility and abuse in Scotland in terms of the politics. It's very divisive, and it was something that gave me great anxiety because of the level of abuse I knew I would suffer from what's called the cyber nats in Scotland. And I was concerned that I would and my family would experience threats of violence.
There were reports at the weekend that you'd gone into hiding.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So we had to leave our home and be relocated because of some of the threats we were experiencing and because of the risk being assessed and managed at that time. So I've had to have involvement with parliamentary security services, and also they've been liaising, and I've been in contact with Police Scotland about it as well. Yeah. So the kids had to leave their home. We're still not home.
Are you not?
No, because we need to have the risk assessment completed and a sort of management plan in place. And I don't want to put anyone else at risk. My family mean the world to me. I'm a mum before I'm anything else. And my girls deserve to feel safe in their house. And that's got to be the number one priority.
I mean, I don't want to go into any more details about that side of what you're having to do, because your security is going to be very delicate and very sensitive, and I don't wish to put you at any more risk. I think it's also very mindful at this moment to remember what has happened to MPs. There have been loss of life, and that is a very serious point.
Absolutely. I mean, we've lost fantastic MPs who I knew personally. Sir David Amos, an amazing person to work with. I did a lot of work with him in animal welfare, and Joe Cox as well, of course, who was such a compassionate MP. And
I'm just very struck. It was actually the 15th of October 2021 when Sir David Amos was killed. So we've just passed that anniversary when we're talking, because I think we have to also, when we have these conversations, remember MPs are people. and what's going on there. So, it's not easy, I'm sure, for you to talk about that, and you're not in your own home.
No, we're not in our own home, and that has to be managed and assessed. And we've had a number of threats. I'm going to brick you in the street. Your life is going to be shortened now. Watch out, those types of things. So the police have to assess all of that because, as you say, we've lost MPs. They've lost their lives in politics because of violence.
Have you been scared that that you would also have something like that happen? Have you been scared to that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not taking. I'm not going to underplay any risks. As I say, that's very anxiety provoking for me. But my main concern is my children.
Of course.
We live locally in the constituency, and also my staff. So I have like a greater responsibility as well for other people. So
just broadly speaking, I'm interested in your ideas and your thoughts. You obviously did support an independent Scotland because you stood for SNP.
Yeah, because
do you no longer support that?
No, I don't. When I joined the SNP in 2014, I was told it would be a big broad tent of people from all different backgrounds. Everybody would be welcome with all different views. Throughout the time I've been there, I've had struggles in terms of people frowning upon myself because I'm a Christian and I attend a free church, just like Kate Forbes does, and some of those issues have come up. So I've felt very much that being a Christian was something that was not welcome in the SNP. Then I had the Gender Recognition Act, which I felt there were grave concerns about safety for women and girls in sports, in safe spaces, etc., and that those concerns should be raised and accepted, and compromise could happen. And I got into an issue with the SNP earlier this year because I wrote to the Secretary of State on behalf of my constituents, because I've represented everybody's views in my constituency, whether it's been an SNP view or not, throughout. So I wrote to Alistair Jack because women had contacted me, lots of women had contacted me to say, please raise the fact that, we're concerned about the Gender Recognition Act. And I did that. I wrote to Alistair and said, basically, can you find a resolution that respects everybody's rights and doesn't undermine the devolution process? Well, I mean, that was treated like almost heresy, raising my constituents' concerns. The Cybernats went absolutely crazy again online. I have to represent everybody. Actually,
what you're saying there, though, because you've brought a few issues in, is that being within the SNP, from your experience, and I'm just mindful, I saw that Alice, I want to give you the chance to respond to this before our time is up, but Alison Thulis, who is the SNP's Home Affairs spokesperson at Westminster, has suggested you acted inappropriately to other SNP members. I don't know the details of that, but what do you want to say to that before I ask this question?
Well, I mean, I think that's a disgraceful thing to say, to be quite honest, because the SNP have a conduct committee that's, fully functioning. Not once has that conduct committee ever contacted me about any allegations. I've never been at any hearings. I've never even had a letter from them about anything. So to say that now, I feel is just mud flinging. And actually, given the mental health struggles I've had, I think it's shocking that colleagues continue to sort of double down on bullying and victimisation.
Has anyone been in touch with you from the SNP?
Not until this week. So throughout all of the issues I've had, and even when I was speaking about having panic attacks because of the SNP behaviour towards me in the past month, no one had contacted me. This week on Monday, when I came back, Stephen Flynn wrote me a brief email saying he hoped I was okay, basically. And that's the first contact I had. Still never heard from Humza Yousaf or anyone else in the SNP.
The leader of the SNP. I mean, it's just been, of course, the SNP conference as well. What I was going on to say, just a couple more if I can, which was, it's very striking that you're painting an image of a party that you don't trust with the independence of Scotland. That's what you said.
That's true.
I don't want to misrepresent. But it also sounds like you've also gone off the idea of an independent Scotland generally.
To be honest with you, I feel absolutely exhausted by nationalism. I feel like Scotland's exhausted by nationalism, and all of our services are exhausted now. It's become very divisive. It was badged to me in 2014 as a big broad tent. It's become narrower and narrower and narrower towards nationalism, that I don't even recognise the party I joined from 2014.
So why not join Labour? Why join Conservative when you say Labour's probably the one that might take that seat anyway? Why not go more towards that direction? What do the Conservatives have for you that Labour do not?
Well, it wasn't about how can I hold a seat.
No, I recognise that. But just looking at the people around you, your constituents, and what they may be in tune with, what was it about Conservatives that Labour were not giving to you?
Yeah, there are a few different issues there. One was that actually Prime Minister Rishi Sunak his team reached out to me to ask if I was okay, and I was able to speak with him about some of the issues I'd had, and he was very clear to me that I would be welcome as a Christian in the Conservative Party. I come from a Conservative family, so my parents are Conservative, so that's, so
that's a link to
link, yeah. So I've never hated anyone in politics, so I never had this kind of thing that SNP say I hate Conservatives, or I don't hate anybody. There's all different policies that people can work together on more constructively, and I think just in terms of feeling that I could move on and be accepted for who I am, not have to change my faith, values round about that, and really just to kind of feel that inclusion. I felt the Prime Minister reaching out was something that I hadn't had.
You hadn't had that link to leadership?
No, for you. Well, I've never sat down with Nicola Sturgeon, had a one-to-one, never sat down with Humza Yousaf, had a one-to-one like that.
But I think what I'm learning from this conversation, which I hadn't seen in any of your other dialogues and conversations since your decision, is, are you saying you feel you were pushed out of the SNP because you were a Christian as well?
I didn't feel particularly wanted in the SNP as a Christian.
In what way?
Well, similar to the issues that Kate Forbes had.
Who ran for the leadership, for those who may not remember.
Yeah. You were made to feel like, you're a Christian, but just don't kind of raise it very much. Certainly don't vote in line with any of your beliefs. So I had voted against abortion regulations previously in the Parliament, and that had been another issue with the SNP. They'd actually said that some people in the SNP had said at the time that I shouldn't be able to be selected because of those issues as an MP last time. So there had been ongoing issues about not being able to be who I am, not being a big broad tent of all different people from different political backgrounds.
I just wanted to make sure I'd asked that particular question.
It's very hard.
Yes, well, you've had a journey on many levels. Can I just finally ask about one journey, which was, it's quite a short journey, but it was a big statement when you crossed the floor yesterday. You went and sat next to or close to Theresa May.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Can I just say to the members, the member was in the middle of asking a question. I think it's disrespectful to your own side. You should think about what you're doing. And can I just say, people should wait. Just because you want to cheer somebody coming in, do it at the right time. Totally inappropriate. Come on, Marco.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, I've always respected Theresa May because I think she's given so much of her life to politics. And again, that's another thing. When I've worked in the Parliament, it's always been across party. And Theresa May, I think, is someone who, for women in politics, is someone that we look up to. And I felt very supported by her in terms of making that journey, which was a massive deal for me on the day. And I just want to kind of thank her for that. And I did that yesterday as well, because it was very poignant for me that she took me under her wing that day and helped me with the process.
Dr. Lisa Cameron speaking to me earlier. An SNP spokesperson said that Lisa Cameron's constituents will be appalled that they're now represented by a Conservative and Unionist MP. They say, this statement says rather, Lisa Cameron should now do the right thing and step down to allow a by-election. Her constituents elected an SNP MP, not a Conservative, and they deserve to have the democratic opportunity to elect a hard-working SNP MP who will put the interests of Scotland first. On a personal basis, we wish her well. And as I said, Lisa rejects that idea of a by-election being necessary. We also this morning have put to the SNP that Lisa's views that she felt ostracised within the political party as a Christian. And the party spokesman has said, we had not, as a programme, given it enough time or detail to respond adequately. We will, of course, carry any statement sent to us after this broadcast and bring that to you.